I think the most evil organizations in the world today are the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
Because our economic relations with Africa are simply a continuation of European colonialism.
France did not see what is happening in West Africa coming.
What's happening in Burkina Faso must be supported.
I'm not your puppet. So why Chinese talk about Germans?
IMF, World Bank, all other institutions, they make African countries jump through hoops.
The West has a plan to squeeze even more money out of Africa, and they're calling it tax collectors without borders.
IMF loans, ECOWAS betrayal, broken promises. But across Africa, a new resistance is rising, and 3 bold nations have already walked away. Is this the beginning of Africa's economic freedom? This is Afriscope TV, where truth lives and propaganda dies. If you believe Africa is not for sale, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. I stand with Africa. And if you feel this message, tap super thanks to keep the resistance alive. For decades, the IMF has claimed to offer lifelines to struggling African economies. But many now call these lifelines what they truly are: leashes. IMF loans come with painful strings: slash your health budget, cut education, remove fuel subsidies, all to prioritize debt repayment to foreign creditors.
IMF, World Bank, all other institutions, they make African countries jump through hoops. Loans will never be able to pay. The US, when they borrow money, they're getting it in 1.5, 1.9 interest rate. Africans, when they get the same amount of money, they're paying 9, 10%. The people who don't need a break, they get a break. The ones who need a break, they don't get a break. The sheer survival of the World Bank, IMF, is based on the fact that African countries and many other developing countries do not succeed. Their success is based on our failure. That has to change. And guess who can make that change? We, the children of Africa.
In Kenya, these conditions triggered mass youth-led protests. Subsidies were gutted, taxes raised, and inflation skyrocketed.
The West has a plan to squeeze even more money out of Africa, and they're calling it tax collectors without borders. And so what they're doing is that they're training hundreds of thousands of tax collectors that aren't loyal to any one country in Africa, and they're providing those as resources so that the African governments can tax their own citizens more effectively. It's basically a 1-2 punch. The first thing that they did through the IMF and the World Bank was they got African countries in a lot of debt, and the cost of servicing that debt started to eat up almost all of the government revenue in many of the African countries. And the Western world came in and said, hey, what if we train tax collectors for you and offer all of our advanced analytical tools that we use to tax people in the Western world? And if you do these tax reforms that we propose, we'll give you even more loans so that you can do your big projects, or maybe you can get that chalet in Switzerland. But unlike the Western world, where the tax money might actually find itself circulating in the economy, because they set up these African nations in a lot of debt, the money that they collect from this increased tax revenue is just going to get shot out into the Western world, which is something that even the colonialists of the 1700s couldn't have dreamed would happen. So is there anything that can be done about this? My recommendation is, if you're an African leader, even though it's hard, hit block on the World Bank, hit block on the IMF, and just don't do business with these people in the future. So I'm not trying to be negative. I'm a big believer in Africa, but I certainly want to call out a scheme when I see one.
PLO Lumumba once warned Africa cannot continue to dine where it's always on the menu. And yet, the IMF continues to serve the same poison pill: austerity. This has become a predictable pattern from Ghana to Nigeria. As ActionAid reports, IMF policies force poor nations to choose between servicing debt and investing in their people. Even the IMF's own April 2025 outlook admits that debt repayments are crowding out education and health spending. If you're tired of this injustice, hit that like and share. Tap super thanks to power this movement. Drop a comment. Africa is not for sale. Created in 1975 to promote regional cooperation, ECOWAS was once a symbol of unity. But its credibility collapsed in January 2025 when Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger walked out in an unprecedented move now called a Sahel exit. Why? Because ECOWAS had imposed sanctions and threatened war against these nations after military takeovers, while doing little to address terrorism or neo-colonial influence. In the eyes of many Africans, ECOWAS became a puppet for the West, particularly France.
What's happening in Burkina Faso must be supported. What's happening in Mali must be supported. What's happening in Niger must be supported. If you care the least bit about our future, how else are we going to get France out of Africa? How else are we going to get Britain, Germany, all those former colonizers? They're now in as multinationals, siphoning billions out of Africa, using safe havens to hide their returns. We know they're here. They are now wolf in sheep's clothing. I challenged ECOWAS when they were trying to mobilize the military to go and fight Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Oh, we can have a coup. I said, help me understand something. France has had coups against these nations. When France is forcing these countries to deposit their bank reserves with France, that's a coup, an economic coup. When France is making sure that all natural resources for these countries belong to France, that's a coup. But by and large, with the exception of Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali that said, France, pack your bags and go home.
But the truth is, it's a million miles from the reality of EU-Africa trade policy as it exists now. Because our economic relations with Africa are simply a continuation of European colonialism, perpetuating exploitation by other means. Africa trades more with Europe than it does with itself. It's portrayed as a poor continent, but actually it's the richest. It's just that the people there are denied the fruits of their land and their labour by unequal economic relations, by unfair trade rules, by illicit capital flights into the Western banks, and by multinational corporations allowed off the leash by Washington, London and Brussels. I don't think you'd have to be a genius to know that the last thing the Horn of Africa needs is more foreign military bases, more weapons and more European meddling. What we call our strategic relationship isn't about human flourishing, it's about the EU's ambitions as a superpower. There's now a new great game in the Horn of Africa. Greater and lesser powers are pockmarking the place with military bases. France, the US, China, Germany, Japan, Italy, Saudi Arabia all have a presence in the tiny area of Djibouti alone. Mercenaries are swarming in from all quarters. The entire region is being militarized. War is in the air. And what about the people facing climate and food insecurity? None of this benefits them. We talk about instability, but we only make it worse. We flood the place with weapons, hand over the profits to European arms companies, and charge the bill to our citizens. And then with the carnage, we go back in and we do it all again. It's a racket. Strategic relationship, it's one thing after another, isn't it? Really, it's the same as it ever was. And all I can say is, God save Africa from Europeans offering help.
Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood before his people and declared, "Our sovereignty is not negotiable. We will not be slaves in our own land."
Why is France so pissed at these African countries? It all started with these military bases. In 2023, the last French soldier left Mali. By 2024, Burkina Faso and Niger followed. Brick by brick, the French military empire in Africa is being dismantled. But why is that? You see, for decades, France kept military bases across West Africa, left over from East colonial empire, that claimed this was to aid the fight against terrorism, especially in the Sahel region. But something wasn't adding up. Despite over 5,000 French troops on the ground, terror attacks kept rising. In Mali alone, deaths from insurgent violence jumped from 320 in 2014 to over 4,000 by 2019. The people became frustrated. Then came the bombshell in 2021, when Mali's transitional government accused France of arming rebels. This was a major blow for Macron and his folks. By 2022, they gave France a deadline to leave. Burkina Faso and Niger did the same in 2023 and 2024. But this wasn't just about military failure. Something else was involved. Something that made Macron so furious that he considered a military action against this country. Yeah, we're talking about resources now. You see, Niger supplies 15 to 17% of France's uranium. Yet, 80% of Nigerians live without electricity. Burkina Faso has a lot of gold, but the country isn't seeing much benefit from it. So people started asking, who is this really benefiting? This was why they made the move to replace these French military bases with factories.
We need to look at what's happening in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. President Traoré is standing up. He is saying the natural resources in Burkina Faso, they belong to the people of Burkina Faso. Niger is doing the same thing. Mali is doing the same thing. Every leader must look at what's happening in the Sahel nations. If I may use the example of what happened in Niger when the government decided they were going to take over the mining of their uranium. The French companies that were mining the uranium were paying the government 80 cents a kilo for the uranium, and then turning around and selling the uranium to the rest of the world at 200 euros a kilo. So that one move from the Nigerian government to say we are now going to take ownership of our own uranium, they went from realizing about $1 billion in uranium resources to over 300 billion a year.
France did not see what is happening in West Africa coming. So they find themselves at a time when they are very weak economically, when at home the population of immigrants is growing bigger and bigger. You go to cities such as Marseille, you find Algerians, you find Moroccans, you find Senegalese, you find Guineans, you find Burkinabe, and things are not happening as they used to be then.
ECOWAS selective outrage exposed it as a club of presidents protecting themselves, not the people. Its silence on sit-tight leaders, constitutional manipulations, and Western exploitation speaks volumes. What we are witnessing is not collapse. It's a rebellion and a rebirth. The Alliance of Sahel States, AES, is not just a defiance of ECOWAS, but a blueprint for new Pan-African solidarity. With a common passport, joint military, and fresh alliances with Russia, Turkey, and Iran, the AES is forging a new path. Dr. Arikana once said, "You can't be free if your currency is printed in Europe." Across the continent, Africans are demanding debt cancellation and economic justice. The message is simple: why should a generation's future be sacrificed for odious debts created by systems we did not design?
Sankara said in 1987 at the meeting of the OAU, at that time he said, we should even stop paying the debts. In any event, we deserve reparations for slavery. We deserve reparations for colonization. And if we take a joint decision as Africans that we are not going to pay debts, what will they do to us? Will they nuclear bomb us, all of us? Thomas Sankara was right, that in order to liberate yourself from some of these things, some element of methodical madness is necessary.
Indeed.
Yeah.
It is. And he understood the danger that came with saying that.
Of course.
Because he told them if they don't agree, they don't join him, he won't be back in the next meeting.
Absolutely. And he knew. Thomas Sankara actually knew. And he said, he knew who was planning his murder, and he knew it was his best friend. And he said, if it is him, I have no defense.
Let him betray me, but I won't do that.
And you've got to have something like that. Not these individuals now, you see the African leaders saying, oh, they agree with what I've been saying all along, that they should not all 54 of them be summoned to Europe and America. But you wait, during the coronation of Charles, they'll once again be trooping to London. And they'll be herded into buses again. Then they'll come back and complain. So you must treat yourself with respect if you want to be respected.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, they call me Eduardo. Hey, God. Ibrahim Traoré has done it again. Now, Ibrahim Traoré rejected financial assistance from IMF and World Bank. Yes, they wanted to assist Burkina Faso with loan
to help and aid in developing Burkina Faso fast. But Ibrahim Traoré told them, he said, you will not find Burkina Faso in your debtors lists. He said, I will raise everything I will use to build Burkina Faso in Burkina Faso land. I don't need anything from World Bank or IMF to develop Burkina Faso, because every African country coming to collect loan is seen as beggar. Ah, God. I don't want to be talking too much. Share this video, like and comment your opinion from wherever you are watching from. And as you are watching, be sharing this video so that all African sons and daughters can see how proud Ibrahim Traoré is making us.
Malema says it best, they give us aid with one hand and steal our wealth with the other. This isn't about rebellion for the sake of it, it's about reclaiming control. Africa is tired of dancing to the IMF's drum, tired of ECOWAS betrayals, and tired of watching our leaders kneel to powers that don't serve us. A Pan-African awakening is underway. But this movement needs voices. Your voice. Smash that like. Subscribe for more Afriscope updates. Comment, I stand with Africa. Tap super thanks if you believe this message must reach the world. This is Afriscope TV, where truth lives and propaganda dies. Disclaimer. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. Afriscope TV does not promote hate, violence, or misinformation. All content is based on publicly available data and expert commentary. Viewers are encouraged to think critically and verify independently.